So good morning and welcome everyone. Thank you all for joining us this morning in the celebration of the launch of We Can Do This, Sacramento's trailblazing political women and the community they shaped. First, I have a few housekeeping items for you. I'm Elizabeth Holloway. We have a brief program today while you will hear from some of the trailblazing women themselves. We are going to save questions for the end, so feel free to pop those in the chat when you think of them. Or we can, I'll make sure to call on you if you raise your hand and want to ask it yourself once we open it up for questions. We have some special guests with us here this morning. I would like to welcome former mayor and current leader of the Capital Women's Campaign, Ms. Heather Fargo, former city council member and current president of the Sacramento chapter of the National Women's Political Caucus, Lauren Hammond. I would also like to thank Maria and her team at the NWPC for helping to organize and run this event. We also have with us the former League of Women Voters Andrew Scholarship winners, Giselle Sanchez of 2020 and Kayla Lewis of 2021. And we have the Sacramento League of Women Voters President, Brenda Main. It is now my honor to introduce to you not only the author of this book, but a dear friend of mine who has served as a role model for me my entire life. She has always encouraged me to explore my interests, paying no mind to expectations. And she has inspired me to approach everything that I do with passion, strong curiosity, and a sense of humor, to break barriers and to question barriers and to promptly break them, to fight hard for what I believe in and to have fun doing it. I will warn you this morning that she will be far too humble. So I hope you will all join me in welcoming and congratulating Chris Hunter. Chris?
Well, thank you, Elizabeth. That was just a lovely introduction. I also want to thank Lauren Hammond and the NWPC for hosting this event, as well as Heather Fargo. She's been like instrumental in writing the book. She wrote the last chapter, which is essentially a guide for women who might be interested in running for office, all kinds of resources available to them. Also, she's been really wonderful, tireless about promoting the book. I'd like to also mention that this is not a solo project by any means. From the get-go, I think I first thought about the project 10 years ago and got started in earnest in 2019. There are many contributors, and I want to just say areas that were really instrumental. I had a lot of help in the research, in interviews, in writing the book, editing it, proofreading it, and doing the cover design, formatting it, and of course, promoting the book. In particular, I'd like to thank certain women. Barbara Rudin, who is the daughter of now deceased Anne Rudin, as you may know, she died just this last Thanksgiving. Barbara helped to proofread the book, and she read some of it to Anne. Anne was starting to lose her memory, so I'm not sure how much she really internalized, but according to Barbara, she was really pleased because there's a significant part of the book that is devoted to Anne and all of her accomplishments. Also, I'd like to thank Lori Hensley, who is my proofreader and publicist. She's just been essentially a hand holder. I carry around a certain amount of anxiety, it turns out, so she's helped to guide me through this process. Also, I hope here today is Jasmine Moffat, my great-granddaughter. She did that spectacular painting that is pictured on the cover. As well, Vanessa Perez, I'm not sure if she's here, but she did the actual book cover design. And also with the League of Women Voters, former President Nancy Compton, she edited the book. Sam Cowan did the proofreading, the interior design, the formatting and design of the book. And of course, Elizabeth, who has been my tech savvy person, has helped me out of a lot of quandaries. Also, I do want to mention, and I think she might be here, Rivka Sass, who is the former CEO of the library. She made it happen that we could buy books, that they bought books to place in branch libraries. And so not to be forgotten are all the women who contributed to the book, including Heather and Lauren and many more. They're here, many of them are here today. The book is a deep dive into what it was like growing up. And for many of the women, Their experiences as a young child were pivotal in propelling them eventually to run for office. So we'll go through some of those life-changing events, what inspired them to run, what gave them the courage to run, how they led once they were in office, and some hilarious stories about things that happened when they were in office. My goal was to write a history of women who are typically overlooked. It's time we as women took care to share our stories. And this one little book is an attempt to share some of those stories. We have some very special guests today. Ellie Silverman, she's Professor Emeritus from the University of Calgary Women's Study Program, and she's a friend. She read the book and wrote the really glowing recommendation on the back cover, which did touch my heart. Also here today is former Supervisor Sandra Smoley, as well as Joyce Mihanovich, who was the AA to former Supervisor Ida Collin, as well Lila Ferris, who was former City Council person and also served as AA to Ida Collin, and Kay Neprath, whom we all owe a debt of gratitude to. She's no longer living in Sacramento, but for many years, she was instrumental not only in helping to provide safe, affordable housing, but she saved a great many historic structures. Most recently, she was instrumental, when she was well into her grandmother phase, in saving the historic train depot we have downtown. Also here is Pat Andrews. I think she's here. She's representing now Judge Kim Mueller, who served on the City Council in the late 80s, as well as Pam Johnson, who was my former sister-in-law. And she was very instrumental in helping me understand how women have advanced the arts and how they've also faced and broken down many barriers against them. So finally, where to find the book. The book, as I mentioned, is currently in every single branch library. It's also available in several bookstores. East Village Bookshop has the book, Avid Reader on Broadway, Time Tested Books, as well as Warehouse Creative has a few books in their collection, and We Can Do This is there. Shortly, Sacramento high schools will have books in their libraries. All 4 Los Rios Community College districts have the book in their library. And by mid-February, I believe it'll be available online. However, to the extent you can, please buy it locally and we can support our local bookshop owners. Finally, I want to underscore the importance of the Ann Rudin Scholarship. We have 2 scholarship winners with us this morning. They help women who are training in public administration and public policy. They are the next group to lead our community, and it's exciting to have those 2 women here today. Elizabeth?
Great. Well, thank you, Chris. And again, congratulations. I am now going to hand it over to former mayor and current leader of the Capital Women's Campaign, Heather Fargo.
Well, good morning to everybody. First of all, thank you for joining us. We really appreciate being able to share what has been a momentous event, certainly in Chris's life, and a lot of us have been involved in this. So it's great to finally get this book out there, and we really hope that you'll enjoy reading it and sharing it and gifting it, and passing it on to other people as well. So I'll first want to start by thanking Chris Hunter for spending the amount of time and energy and brain cells that she has to get this book created. As she mentioned, there's really not a lot of books written about women in political office, and certainly here in Sacramento, this is the first time that these stories have been told in writing. We do have a book that was done a few years ago that Angelique Ashby helped get to happen, which was of the first city councilwoman in California, Luella Johnson. But after that, there's really not much written about any of the women ever elected in Sacramento. So it's a pretty significant piece of work that we have here. I also want to add my remembrance to Ann Rudin, a former mentor of mine, a first elected woman mayor in the city of Sacramento who passed away on Thanksgiving. And I certainly think that being able to, provide scholarships for women interested in these areas of public affairs and politics and public policy is a really significant thing that we can do by purchasing this book. As Chris mentioned earlier, I did write the last chapter, which I consider the next chapter, which is really to highlight the women that are going to come now. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that this is an election year, 2022. We have at least 5 women running for city council here in the city of Sacramento this year. Plus there are other women running for other offices, including state senate and others. So women have always volunteered more. They've always voted more once they let us vote. And I really hope that in the future, we'll also have even more women running for office. So there's some resources there that weren't available when I first ran that are listed in the book that not only include the Capital Women's Campaign, the National Women's Political Caucus. Women Democrats of Sacramento was active then and is the oldest political club in California. So we have some interesting historical markers here in our community. There's also organizations like Women Lead, Emerge, Close the Gap. They're all identified in the book for you to reference. And there's one that it didn't make it into the book, which I think should have, which is the newly formed Status on the Commission of Women and Girls, which was just formed here in Sacramento County. And so there are a lot of opportunities, not only to run for office, but to serve on boards and commissions, and certainly to be involved in politics at every level, which is really why we had formed the Capital Women's Campaign, to both inform women about what's going on, what opportunities are out there, and to encourage active political involvement. We need women to be more involved in running the world. It needs our help desperately. So again, I want to thank Chris for doing this book, which documents some significant contributions of Sacramento's elected women, but tells some of the humorous stories that happen behind the scenes. Of course, we couldn't share all of them in print, but thank you again for inviting me today, and thank you for joining us today at this conference. And I'll turn it back over to Elizabeth for our next speaker. Bye.
Thank you, Heather. And I will note that in addition to the next chapter at the end of the book, you can read more about Heather's contributions to the city on page 87. So now it is my pleasure to introduce former city council member and current president of the Sacramento chapter of the National Women's Political Caucus, Lauren Hammond. Lauren, you're muted still. There you go.
I got it. I want to take a moment to thank Chris Hunter for doing this book. Her interviews reminded me of a lot of things you just kind of let go because you're not there anymore. But it was quite an experience, and I really appreciated Chris's work and Heather's. I want to thank Maria for doing the Zoom, and I've enjoyed my 2 years being president of NWPC because frankly, if women don't help each other, we're not going to get there. So I was asked to talk about something in particular in my life that pointed me towards public service. So I think most of you know about the 1993 uprising in Los Angeles, but there are only those of us of a different generation that remember the first Watts riot in 1965. I was 9 years old, and for some reason, neither my mom or my dad were home that night. We found out later they were stuck on the other side of the National Guard tanks on Crenshaw Boulevard. As you can tell, I was living in LA. That's where I was born. And there was a curfew, and we lived at my grandmother's house at that time. And grandma couldn't take us for our ice cream. This is August, it's Los Angeles, it's hot, it's smoggy. And that was one of our pleasures, was grandma taking us to the store to get ice cream. We couldn't leave the house. There was a curfew set at 7, 8 o'clock. Anyway, a few days later, after things settled down, our whole family took a drive into Watts. The devastation was horrible. And even at 9 years old, I just knew this was not good and this should never happen. And I guess that's part of what propelled me to public service. And it's an incident that's obviously stayed with me my whole life. So let me switch gears real quick and just say that NWPC Sacramento wants to help women run for office. We want you to succeed, which is why we take the time to endorse folks who believe in what we believe in. And it's important to have women's groups and other groups. They're going to listen to someone that may not look like them, but you know they're going to do a good job. And it's important that we give folks like that the opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you, Lauren. You can read more about Lauren's experience as a trailblazer, specifically on page 42. So I recommend you all check that out. I will now hand it over to the 2021 recipient of the League's Andrew Scholarship, Kayla Lewis.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Kayla Lewis. I was this year's recipient of the League of Women's Voters of Sacramento County's Ann Rudin Scholarship. I would first like to thank Chris and all those who collaborated for donating the proceeds from We Can Do This for the Ann Rudin Scholarship Fund. This scholarship will continue to help students for many years to come in the honorable legacy of the first elected woman mayor of Sacramento, Ann Rudin. As a personal recipient, I can attest to the value that this scholarship has provided myself, as well as the value and benefit it will bring other students in the future. This scholarship helped alleviate the financial stresses that inevitably come with being a grad student. As of right now, I am almost finished with my second year at Lincoln Law School. My goals after I graduate are to become a criminal law attorney and provide legal assistance to as many people as possible. For as long as I can remember, I have had a passion for criminal law, and I am now becoming closer to that dream every day. I am extremely honored to be here today, not only to share my personal experience of how this scholarship aided my academic success, but to promote We Can Do This, as the proceeds will ultimately help many deserving students in the future. So thank you all so much. And I will now hand the mic over to the lovely 2020 Ann Rudin recipient, Giselle Sanchez.
Thank you, Kayla, and thank you, Chris, for the invite and for writing this book. I'm Giselle Sanchez. I was awarded the Ann Rudin Scholarship in 2020 while I was in my last year of earning my master's in public policy and administration from Sacramento State. It did not only help me in relieving the stress of paying for school, but it also meant the world to be recognized as a woman with the potential to be a figure in the public sphere and bring changes to our community. Coming from a Latinx community, it was clear that there's not that many opportunities for people who looked like me. It was rare to hear of any Latinos going to college, and it was even less rare to see people of color or women of color in positions of leadership. I grew a passion for promoting racial equity, and I graduated from San Jose State with a bachelor's in sociology with a focus in community change. I'm very grateful for the mentors that I had there that encouraged me to pursue a graduate program in public policy and to improve the systems and structures for people of color. The scholarship supported me in my education, which was incredibly important in putting me on the right path towards a career in public service and policy. In my education, I gained so many skills for developing strategies to address social issues. I had the pleasure of graduating with distinction for my work in a final project where I recommended policy interventions for improving college completion rates among Latinx students. And it gave me the opportunity to work in a place where I'm feeling like I am making a difference. I'm currently working as the council specialist for the California Interagency Council on Homelessness, where I help coordinate efforts across state departments to break down silos and to allow our state leaders to work together to prevent and end homelessness in the state. I recognize that I'm just starting out, but I hope to do so much more in this space, especially in promoting racial equity and diversity. And I hope we all continue to support more young women in pursuing work in the public sector, a place where they are very much needed. Thank you.
Thank you, Giselle and Kayla. I know that we will be seeing and hearing a lot more from you in the future. I will now turn it over to the Sacramento League of Women Voters President, Brenda Main.
Thank you, Elizabeth. First of all, on behalf of the League of Women Voters of Sacramento County, I want to thank you all for joining us today to celebrate Christine's wonderful book about Sacramento's political women. We've noticed at the League that many of the women in this book actually sharpened their political skills through League membership. So we are very proud of them, just as we are extremely proud of all of the women that Christine has featured in this book. I especially want to thank Christine for her great generosity in dedicating the proceeds from the sale of this book to the Ann Rudin Scholarship Fund. As a former president of both the League of Women Voters of Sacramento County and LWV California, Mayor Rudin epitomized what the League stands for. That's why the League sponsors a scholarship in her name every year. The scholarship recipients who are here today, Giselle and Kayla, two amazing young women, carry on the legacy of Ann Rudin and all of the amazing women that Christine honors in her book. So today, Christine, I want to honor you on behalf of the League for writing a really entertaining book. It's a great read, by the way, and for helping us sustain the Ann Rudin Scholarship for the Kaylas and Giselles of the future. And we look forward so much to seeing what they can do. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Brenda. And I will echo, it is a very entertaining read. So that is our show. We will now open up the floor to any questions. Feel free to pop those into the chat or raise your hand and we will take you off of mute. To kick things off, I'd like to open this question up to all of our speakers, so feel free to chime in. I'm hoping that you guys can speak a little bit to the women that inspired you to become a trailblazer and to not take no for an answer and to make waves. Maybe Chris, do you want to kick off this question?
Yeah. So in truth, it's my mother. Although when you're young and you're growing up, you often don't appreciate what your mother and your father are doing. I was able to fulfill a little sneaky idea. I put my mother's photo on the dedication page of We Can Do This. In 1959 and 60, she was the president of the Sacramento League of Women Voters. And the pictures of her on the steps of a fighter jet. She's about to go off into the sky with a handsome young jet pilot. And it's a beautiful photo of her. And it does pretty much capture what she was up against back in the late 50s and early 60s. I didn't understand until much later. She divorced in 1960, and there was so much stigma against women getting divorced. Very courageous of her to do that. And she left a life of relative prosperity to relative, poorness. She was a secretary for many years. So she was my primary inspiration. Of course, Ann Rudin was the next one, and I helped campaign for her and all of the women who followed. But I do need to remember my mother.
Thank you, Chris. Does anyone else want to speak to this? We have some questions that are popping up in the chat. Okay, I will just move to those. So somebody is wondering how they could get a copy of the book autographed by Chris and the women on our panel this morning.
So I'll chime in again, but I mentioned in the earlier remarks that the book is available in every single public library in Sacramento. It's available at Los Rios Community College District Libraries, and the stores that are now handling it are Avid Reader on Broadway, East Village Bookshop, as well as Time Tested Books, as well.
And beers soon.
Warehouse Creative. Go ahead.
And also beers as well on S Street will also be selling the book, I believe. So there are books out there. In terms of getting one actually autographed, we haven't actually figured out what that process is going to be, but I think if you leave your information in the chat, we can figure out a way to make that happen for you. So let us know who you are and how we can get something to you.
Okay. So this one, I'm going to pose this one to Heather. What advice do you have for younger women who are interested in becoming more active in local government?
Well, some of the most important things are to develop your own, I guess, courage and self-esteem. I think that it's very important that women in public office or actually in life are good at reading, good at writing, good at public speaking, confident in their beliefs. And that takes some experience to get to that point. I did a lot of mine as a community activist. I really wasn't involved in politics until I moved to Sacramento and realized I was living in a neighborhood that wasn't getting its fair share of attention from the city. You have to find your voice. You have to figure out what your passions are. And then you have to put it into action. If you're a young woman, you need to get involved in organizations and rise to leadership within those organizations. Kind of get outside of your comfort zone a little bit. If you can find a mentor or a group that will help support you in developing those skills, I think that would also be a good thing. And there's a lot of the women's organizations, but they're really interested in politics. I would join a women's organization. There's one for young women called FemDems here in Sacramento, and there's also all of the other ones which I mentioned earlier. And get involved and start making it happen. And it doesn't have to all be through politics. It can be through a nonprofit. It can be as a volunteer at your school. It could be leading a PTA. There's all kinds of ways to be involved.
All right. Does anyone else, one of our speakers, want to speak to that at all, or we can move on to the next question?
Well, if I may,
Yes, please.
I would also encourage women, if you're going to be involved in politics and you get involved, whether it's NWPC, Capital Women's Campaign, FemDems, don't be afraid to run for office in that organization.
Right.
It's a really good stepping stone, and it's going to give you some skills that you're going to need.
Right.
And you'll know if you want to do this at a different level after you've spent a couple of years as president or treasurer. And then I'd also suggest to women, we have a hard time asking for money for ourselves. We have no problem raising money for our pet projects or the things that we are really passionate about. One of the things I see a lot of women who do run for office, they're afraid to ask for money for themselves. Well, honey, you need it, so you need to ask for it. And it's one of those things that you learn on the road.
Right. And you have to remember with that, the worst thing they can do is say no.
Right.
Okay, and you set a goal. If maybe they can't give you that much, maybe they can give you half of that much. Or maybe they can refer you to someone else who might have some resources for you, or be able to volunteer or to donate something to your cause. So lots of ways to ask, but it's important to learn how to do that and to feel confident in yourself and in whatever the cause is, because typically when you're running for office, you're not running just for you to be in that position. That's something a lot of men tend to do, is they just want to hold a position. Women tend to run because they want to get something done. They want to affect change. So keep that in mind when you ask.
We have a couple comments in the chat. Claudia recommended Toastmasters as a way to help improve speaking skills and confidence. And then Michelle wrote that she was inspired by women who ran for public office against the odds in the 60s and 70s, like Shirley Chisholm running for president and Geraldine Ferrara running for VP. So Heather, you kind of just briefly touched on my next question, but I'll pose this to anybody. What is different or special or important about the way that women lead?
I think women often lead with their heart as well as with their head. And I think that that when women are, make up a majority of a board, the conversation tends to shift and tends to move towards things that affect regular people, affect women and children, affect education, homelessness, more so than some of the infrastructure, nuts and bolts kinds of things that can sometimes dominate a budget discussion or a policy discussion. And I think I will use an example of when I was mayor, and it was after Katrina, and we had just witnessed everything that had gone on with that hurricane, and in particular, the animals that were separated from their people really touched me. So we were involved here in Sacramento as a city that also has a flood risk, and I was doing emergency preparedness, plans with different communities. And I brought to the council the idea that if we were going to help people be rescued, we were going to take their animals as well as their children, that we would take all of the family. And I remember one of our council members, actually it was Robbie Waters, who really kind of opposed that, thought it wasn't a good idea, that we needed to stay focused only on the people. And I just asked him, Robbie, would you like your wife to choose between you and your dog? And he just sort of took a moment to think about it and said, no, Mary, you're right. And so what we did is we started making plans in Sacramento, both training dog and pet owners to be prepared to take their pets with them, but also our emergency, evacuation folks to know that when we're taking people, when we're rescuing people, we're rescuing their animals as well as the people, so that we don't put people in that position of having to leave their pets behind or stay behind with them, or putting, first responders having to go back and try to, rescue people and pets afterwards. So it's just an example. I think Lauren has something she wants to add to this, though.
Just that I remember the discussion, and I wasn't opposed to it. I just didn't think it was a priority. But by the time the mayor got done talking about it, I realized how important the four-legged members are of a family. And Sacramento may not be the only one to do this, but at that time, I had not heard of any other local government that said this is a priority, the whole family. And Heather's not going to brag about that, but I had to mention it.
Thank you.
Chris or Brenda or Kayla or Giselle, do any of you want to speak on that, or should we move to the next? Okay, so Chris, we actually had a question if you could share your mother's name, because somebody thinks there might be a photo of her on the league's website.
Well, I think it's Joanne Long, L-O-N-G. And you have to remember that was the era. There's a whole section in the book that covers what women faced. Not only did they face economic hardship if they got divorced, but there were so many things that worked against them moving ahead in society. I think my cousin, Lizzie Chase, who does remember my mother, I think she might be in the audience and she might want to speak to this, but it's really nice to have visitors from so far away. Thank you.
And Carol Enns just put a link into the chat with a link to the photo of your mom on the league's website.
Oh, good.
So, Chrissy, this is Lizzie Chase. Hello, sorry, I just get off. I was multitasking. I just got off a call about EPR legislation. And I missed what you had commented, what you had said. I heard you talking about your mother, and
Lizzie, I have found a way. This is just such a pleasant moment when I realized, oh, I wrote the book. I can choose what pictures go in. So my mother was league president in 1959-60 here in Sacramento. I had this wonderful photo. You may have it of her boarding a fighter jet. All
yes,
out in the flight suit and so forth. Because that was one of the privileges at the time, is that a lot of women leaders were taken on flights over Sacramento. So yeah, that's the connection.
Oh, that's awesome. that is so true. Your mother was amazing.
I really quickly want to share a comment in the chat from Karen Humphrey, who said, "What kept me sane was networks of women who supported each other in the tough times. Your family can be an important support system, but political women's networks, especially women in the League of Cities and the organization now known as California Women Lead, were invaluable. Being able to talk to women who share your experience and know where you're coming from, no matter what their political beliefs are, can be very helpful to women in public office or any form of leadership." I wanted to kind of open up a question to Kayla and Giselle. The book talks, as you know, kind of the new generation of leaders. The book talks about what women faced in the late 1960s and early 70s. And I know for me, a lot of it was still surprising, even though this was the experience of many women that I know. And I was curious if you guys had a similar experience. Speak to that a little bit.
Yeah, I think we still face so many difficulties. I know me from a Latinx background, there's not that many resources, or you don't really know a lot of connections to get into politics, get into policy, just those, the resources just to move forward can be difficult. So I'm very appreciative of all the networks that I've built. Yeah, and as women, I think it's very hard to be in a competitive environment. We're not very competitive people. I don't think we're very competitive people. We're more compassionate, as what was said. So that's just kind of the one of the, not really a barrier, but one of the, maybe an obstacle we have to overcome, just that confidence increasing and moving forward. Yeah.
Yep.
Kayla.
It takes time. You're on your way.
Yeah. I think Kayla might be having mic issues, but do you want to give it a shot, Kayla? See if we can hear you.
Can you hear me?
Yes,
Oh, yeah, it worked.
faintly, but maybe if you speak just a smidge louder.
That's strange. Can you hear me better? It must be
Close.
I'm sorry.
No worries, just go for it.
I'm so sorry. I've been sitting here working on technical
Oh, now we can't hear you.
about how it was shocking to you, these women that you knew. No one can hear me, huh?
Sorry, Kayla, I'm having a hard, your mic is cutting in and out. Do you want to pop it in the chat?
Sure.
Okay. So for Chris and Lauren and Heather and Brenda, I was curious if you guys could speak to, you know, when you started out on your trailblazing path to where you are now, is this where you expected to be? Did it go how you planned?
Go for it, Brenda.
No, I had no idea I would end up where I am right now doing what I'm doing with the league. My life had taken a different direction. My career was off in a different direction. And by the time I retired and I needed something to do, and I didn't like the way things were going necessarily and in our government, and I just wanted to get involved. And I just kind of joined the league by accident. The league had a great reputation. I thought, I can fit there. I can join. I can do that. And it's the best thing I ever did. I mean, it's been great for my confidence. It's been great for being probably more a little bit more assertive or more competitive, as Giselle was referring to. It's a really good experience for women to learn how government works and how women can work together to make things better. And that's been extremely valuable. And as I said, it's been an amazing experience.
I'll go ahead and follow up on that a little bit. You know, I don't have, I never took a political science course. I did take debate when I was in high school, and I think that helped. But I had no plans on being involved in politics when I was in college, or even when I first moved to Sacramento. It was my experience of moving to Sacramento in a post-Prop 13 community that made me realize the impact that government was having on my future neighborhood, and to get involved first as helping to form a community association, and then becoming the spokesperson and president of that group for close to a decade, and then being involved in suing the city of Sacramento over it and winning, and then finally running for office because I figured, you know what, I might be able to have more impact if I was sitting in one of those chairs instead of here in the audience. And that's kind of what propelled me to run. It was a combination of anger and just kind of seeing that maybe I could do a better job. And part of it was also, I was working for the California Department of Parks and Recreation. And it was pretty clear that as a woman in that department, I wasn't going anywhere. So it was the idea of becoming, working part-time at state parks and working, full-time for the city was an opportunity for me to be able to show some leadership and move up in terms of my ability to have an impact. And so part of it was a little bit of being discouraged in the career path I had chosen, in addition to seeing an opportunity. And I think that's one thing that Brenda kind of pointed to, is that you're going to be seeing opportunities down the road, whether you're a young woman or even now as an older woman. There's still opportunities out there. So look at those opportunities, stretch yourself a bit, try to have, as much impact as you can, contribute what you can. We all have limits, but we all can make a difference too. So do what you can when you can.
I'd like to add to what Heather has commented on. And that in my life, it has essentially been a very zigzag course.
Yeah.
I started out with a degree, master's degree in printmaking. And my goal initially out of college was to teach art. Then Proposition 13 passed.
Right.
And funding was not available for people like me, part-time teachers. I was fired so that a full-time male could take my job, not lose his money and his salary. So that was sort of an object lesson. And so I think what I did, and I've probably done this throughout my life, is I seized the moment. I looked around and I really didn't continue to try to get teaching jobs when that happened. Mm-hmm. And I became active in the Environmental Council of Sacramento. And it's there that I developed speaking skills. I loved advocating on behalf of ECOS. And from that, I became active in running. I was a co-chair of Lynn Roby's first city council campaign. Never expected that. And she won, and she was a really wonderful council person. And, so zigzag, very, very zigzag. So just seize the moment, recognize when opportunity arises.
I have to agree, because this running for Sacramento City Council was not what I wanted. I was going to finish law school, was going to practice law for a while. Then I was going to run for the Assembly, then the Senate, then Congress. I really thought I could do all these things. So I would say that confidence was never my problem. How's that? However, the plan worked out that way. And I got a job at the Capitol. And like Heather said, the women were only going to go so far. Yes, I know it's the Capitol. And today the Democrats are 2/3 of the majority in both houses. But really, there was a whole lot of guys ahead of me. And in the administration part, the people that make the Capitol run at that time, it was just all guys. There were a whole lot of women there, but the guys were in charge. I'd always been politically active, even in college. And I had been a part of 2 or 3 different political action committees, Democratic clubs, but they were African-American. And I knew that I needed to stretch my reach. So I also got involved with CSUS, which is where I have my Bachelor of Arts, and their Alumni Association, which introduced me to a whole different set of people. And I didn't quite know where I was going with this. I eventually bought a house in the city. I'd been out in the county. Isla Collin had appointed me to the County Planning Commission. She said, "You have the fire in the belly. We need to put you somewhere." I could not get a city appointment. I'm not saying anything bad about anybody, but I was not getting a city appointment. So Isla handed me this, which was a coveted position. Mm-hmm. From there, things really started to change, and I didn't even realize the opportunity that she was giving me. And I was running for office 4 years later. And I was lucky enough to win the first time I ran. And, it just went on from there. And now I'm president of NWPC Sacramento. I think we're doing a great job. We'd love to have more members. There's always something you can do, and you have to figure out what you're comfortable doing, whatever stage you are in life. And I know for the really young people, because actually my wonderful niece is actually watching this, and I can't believe she didn't have a class right now. So I really appreciate her being here. And she's probably one of the youngest ones here. You will have stages in your life. The one you're living in, when you get to our age, now you can see all those stages you were in that you didn't realize, oh, that was a phase. You just have to be true to yourself and believe in yourself, really, because you can do it. It's like the book says, we can do this.
Perfect plug right there. I got a note that Judge Kim Mueller was actually with us this morning. I don't know if she's still on, but if you are, we would love to hear from you if you want to speak to my last question about whether your plan turned out the way you thought it would or not. If you are here and you'd like to speak, feel free to raise your hand so we can unmute you. There you go.
Now, am I on?
You're
Oh,
on.
Oh, wonderful.
hey, hi, Kay.
Hi. Hey, this has been great to see all my old friends.
Good.
I never really set out to be politically active, but I just discovered that being politically active was important if you wanted to change whatever was going on. And I had such good friends, and I am so happy to see a bunch of them today.
It's good to see you.
Good to
Yeah.
see you
Okay.
too.
And I'm glad you're in the book with me on Saving the Depot.
I didn't hear you, Heather.
I said, I'm glad you're in the book with us on Saving the Depot.
Oh, if you're in a book, you're very silent.
Well, that wouldn't be you.
Oh, this has been great. I think it's only the efforts of people who work together and get things done. It's not for loners. I think it's for, pardon me, but I think it's about a committee. So goodbye.
Thank you, Kay. So we're coming to the end of our time. So I wanted to thank you all for being here this morning. And I wanted to, Chris, give you the floor if you want to close out with your hopes and for the book moving forward.
Well, my hope is that a lot of people will read it, and that it will help women who are applying or do a scholarship to the from the Anne Rudin Scholarship Fund. I especially hope that young women read it, because it's important for them to understand on whose shoulders they stand and appreciate their very human stories of essentially overcoming a great deal of hardship and obstacles to pursue your dreams. So it's just, I hope people do enjoy it. Thank you.
Well, thank you everyone again. We've put resources to find the book in the chat, a link to the website, and we hope you guys will all start reading them shortly. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.